Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont, and I was about to uninstall Monster Hunter World when I decided, you know what, should make a sort of wrap-up review for it. I reviewed the original game and Iceborne, but they continue to update it since release with various improvements and quite a lot of new content. And this will also be a chance to talk about the future of the franchise. Monster Hunter Rise is just on the horizon for Switch, with a release for other platforms hopefully not too far behind. And it's also been about a year since Iceborne released, for PC at least, because the console version came out quite a few months before. Quick history recap though, I got into Monster Hunter with World, because although I had tried the other games, the earlier games, been curious about them, just couldn't get into handheld version of Monster Hunter personally. Just found them a bit too clunky and frustrating on the tiny screens with not enough buttons and analog sticks, but I'm a huge fan of World and Iceborne, even if they definitely have their problems. So let's break this video into 3 parts. What I liked about the post-launch content, what I didn't like, and what I'm hoping for in the future from this franchise. So let's kick it off with the positives. We had quite a few monsters added after Iceborne launch, such as Rajang, Stygian Zynoga, Raging Brachydios, and so forth. My personal favourite additions were Fatalis and Safi'Jiva. Both are fights I really enjoyed, and I think Safi'Jiva is probably my favourite Elder Dragon in the series. For now. Both of these fights felt like a culmination of everything you are learning throughout the base game and Iceborne, and it felt like they had learned from past things. Safi'Jiva feels like a better version of Kolv Taroth, in that they are both siege fights. But Kolv Taroth wasn't a huge fan of that one, to be honest. But with Safi and Fatalis we had a chance to put all of the mechanics and skills we've learned to the test against the ultimate monsters. And yet they still felt fair. I enjoyed the fights, their environments and musical themes. Fatalis I think looks ridiculous the way he sort of waddles around, whereas Safi'Jiva's very cool, but even if Fatalis looks silly, he's still a very cool fight. I did find it odd how Fatalis suddenly put a large emphasis on the useless ginger hunter, as if he ever did anything useful in World and Iceborne. I mean, maybe in the other games, but not here. But at least it wasn't a focus on the handler, again. Overall, I was very happy with the amount of free post-launch content. Would have liked to see more, but I mean, it's not like they stiffed us there. There were paid DLCs as well, but these were largely just cosmetic things. Didn't impact my experience whatsoever not having this dance or this sticker, you know? One very small change I enjoyed. When events came to Celiana, each event had its own unique meal to look at. It's not a huge point, but small details are important too. They show the care and thought of the developers, and they also kind of make you hungry every time you look at them. As for things I didn't like, the guiding lands in general. Post-launch didn't touch it too much, but it did add some new areas here and there. Added like a frosty area and a lava area, and we had to go there now and then, but frankly I just wasn't a fan of the whole concept. I think the idea could have worked, but in practice it was just frustrating, as it meant there's another subset of items and materials to acquire that in function weren't any different. They're just guiding lands version. Now you might say the same for, low rank and high rank. High rank is just a better version of low rank stuff, but the monsters did get harder and there were new monsters. Fighting a monster in the guiding lands was not, to me, in any realistic sense, different from fighting them anywhere else, despite the notion of them being stronger or different somehow in the guiding lands. I'd like to see them retire the concept or change it drastically if it ever comes back. I think it needs a big rework. See, if the guiding lands were more of a, and it's a strange comparison to make, but more of a Destiny planet, I'd like it more. Example, you go to the guiding lands, other players who are there in each zone or area will phase in and out, just as they do when you enter and leave areas in Destiny's open world, Something like a persistent open world with real-time players and events and whatnot happening would be more interesting to me. And I also think they need to get rid of the whole, you need this specific guiding lands material for stuff. It's fine to have things that only happen in the guiding lands, but when you need to go there, specifically for materials that you technically should already have, I think is just strange. Make it more so like, special version of Rathalos has spawned in the Guiding Lands, go there and get some thing from it, you know? Almost like making it a hub for the in-game events, instead of events just being started from a board, but I don't know, it's just spitballing an idea at this point. But if we're talking the number one biggest issue I had with Iceborne, it would be Alatreon. What is it with stupid-looking black dragons irritating me so much in games, whereas red dragons are great? Grigori, Safi'Jiva, versus Midir, and Alatreon. Now, I don't care what anyone says, and you won't convince me otherwise. And I'm not trying to convince you, if you like Alatreon, that he's bad or whatever. I just hate him. I think he's a badly designed fight. When I say that, I don't mean it is too hard or it is impossible. This is very strange, because I had this thing on my Midir video. I said, I do not like Midir because... And never in the video did I say, he's too hard. And yet like 90% of the comments were, he's not that hard. I never said he's hard. My problem with Alatreon, first up, every single aspect of World and Iceborne have been progressing around a non-elemental meta. In World, it was all raw. In Iceborne, we generally used raw, or blast, or poison, because they were the best elements. This isn't something the players decided, by the way. This is something the developers did. The developers balanced the game to make most elements pretty useless in base game, and in Iceborne they were a little better, but they still were not as good. Now, of course, you can still use them if you want to, you can beat the game with them, but all of the best stuff was non-elemental. But you don't design a game in one way, then suddenly bring in something that works entirely differently. Outside of being irritating, needing to get a whole new mindset and weapons for one specific fight of the game, Alatreon ignores most of the mechanics brought in by the developers in Iceborne. Clutch claws, wallbangs, and so forth, essentially rendered pointless in this fight. Oh, players are daring to use temporal mantles that we designed and implemented, by the way. This isn't like a mod. Players didn't mod in the temporal mantle. The developers made it, and they let us have it. They're trying to use the temporal mantle to try and get a clutch off on Alatreon and weaken him. No, no, no. Better make every one of his attacks hit 500 times so they instantly remove temporals. It's the sort of mindset there that baffles me. Why would you design something, then get mad at people who are using it? It's like when the developers of Brave Exvius Global got seemingly infuriated at players steamrolling bosses with Thunder God Sid. Promptly they made every single boss have 200% holy resistance in the global version, so he couldn't do that. What's the point? Alatreon felt like a big middle finger to me, and I despise that fight. Nothing about it is fun for me. And DPS checks, I know technically it's not a DPS check, it's a elemental check. In Monster Hunter, that makes no sense. This is not an MMO. These checks exist in games like Final Fantasy or World of Warcraft or whatever, for very different reasons, these gear checks. It doesn't really make any sense in Monster Hunter, because if you're using a lance, which is a defensive and counter-based weapon, well, good luck. And yes, I know, I'm sure someone has beaten Alatreon with a non-elemental basic lance. I understand that, but that's not going to be everyone. That's going to be like less than 1% of players who manage to do that. The point is the philosophy behind the design. Every monster should be designed to be beaten in multiple ways. When you have such a strict sort of thing in there, it just feels like you're veering towards a different type of game entirely. And it's not really what I enjoy about Monster Hunter. I enjoy MMO mechanics in MMOs. I don't enjoy that sort of stuff in Monster Hunter. Then Alatreon, he looks stupid, and it's like you're fighting him in a recycled Safi arena or something. He's like a sour afterthought, sandwiched between the awesome Safi'Jiva fight and the awesome Fatalis fight. I mean, he looks so stupid, I'm sorry. His design feels like something a 14-year-old came up with.
He's the strongest dragon, he has all of the elements. Ooh.
No, get out of here, ugly. As for the future, well, Monster Hunter World was on the Empty Framework engine, which was curious as that's an older engine, but it checks out. Whereas Rise is on the Resident Evil engine, which is their new one. I'm curious about that because the Switch is not a very graphically advanced platform, and if Rise is a Switch-only spin-off, why not just release it in the old engine that Ultimate was on and so forth? Because the Switch is never going to get graphics like the ones you're looking at right now, even in the much older engine. And incidentally, if you're noticing that the gameplay is like really bad in this video, it's probably because I've not played Monster Hunter for a couple of months, and I got sloppy. But I feel like Rise being on the RE engine means it's going to be on other platforms after a timed period on the Switch, but who knows? I won't be double dipping any rate. But if it comes to PC, I will definitely pick Rise and Stories up, because I am a Monster Hunter fan, but I'm not so big a fan that I'd buy it on the Switch. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate the Switch as a platform. In fact, I think it's a pretty nice little console, but it's basically a Nintendo machine for me. I'll play first-party titles on it, whereas third-party titles are usually lackluster in quality, as they can't achieve what I would want. And specifically that is, well, good frame rate most of the time, and honestly my biggest issue would be the online systems, which feel stuck in 2005. I'd love to play more Smash Ultimate, but the online on the Switch, it's just so bad, so out of date. I don't think I've played Smash for more than a year, but for future titles, Rise included, I'd love to see more variety. Part of what makes Monster Hunter interesting to me is the huge variety of monsters, armors, and colourful items. In conversation with my friends, I've mentioned several times that I'd like to see Capcom making a Pokemon game, because A, the Monster Hunter designers seem to be able to design things that don't look awful, as many new Pokemon do, and B, they probably put in more effort and not make some half-assed junk like Sword and Shield. I have zero respect for the developers of Pokemon these days. You know, Pokemon is like the biggest franchise in the entire world, not just video game, franchise, like anything in the entire world, and they put out these like indie game looking things with zero effort put into them. I find it offensive, and I can't believe people defend it. It boggles my mind, but that's a different subject entirely. Iceborne rectified the variety thing a little, but in World in general, too many of the weapons have a strong resemblance to each other, and I want to see them go all out on that front. Expanding layered armor and weapons would be great too. I know some people are not fans of it, but that's why it's optional, you don't have to use it. Having layered versions allows us to make our hunters look exactly how we want. I think that's important. It's a very easy system to put in, so I hope they continue to expand upon that. I think it would be nice if we could get a weapon essence system, where we can apply the essence of a monster to our weapon for a cosmetic change. It could affect gameplay too, I suppose, but honestly I'm thinking about this purely from a cosmetic standpoint. Having Safi's essence on our weapon could give it a glow that somewhat resembles his laser beam, whereas if you had a Kirin essence, you'd have a crackling lightning aura on your weapon, and so forth. I like it when weapons glow. That about does it though. What are your hopes for Rise and the future of Monster Hunter? What did you think of World, Iceborne, and their post-launch content? It's one of the more positive and enjoyable experiences for me from the last few years of gaming experiences, and I hope Monster Hunter remains in my sphere of things to do. It is my most played game on Steam by quite a margin, with 723 hours, not counting the 70 odd hours on PS4 as well, and I'd love to put in another 700. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I will see you very soon. Ciao.